Izzy versus Costa fight is over, and although it wasn't what most people expected, it still managed to deliver. As MMA fans, we've seen a lot of high-profile fights boiling over with bad blood. Rousey versus Tate, Covington versus Woodley, hell, Covington versus Usman. But I was not sold on the hatred between these two. It felt less like hatred and more like a toxic relationship. On this week's episode of I Just Want to Talk, we're going to look at the trajectory of these two light heavyweights, how they came to meet, and how their relationship ended. This whole build-up was fairly unique, but in the ever-evolving world of MMA, we're always looking for a new gimmick or story. Here's two uber-popular fighters who doled out often humorous trash-talking memes. Like a toxic on-again, off-again couple, they seem to bring out the best and worst of each other. I wanted to make this video pre-fight, but had a feeling things would escalate afterwards, and I'm glad I waited. Just a tad bit of background here. Adesanya wins the interim belt against Kelvin Gastelum, then unifies the division by knocking out then champion Robert Whittaker. En route to that championship, he took care of fighters like Derek Brunson and Anderson Silva, and on the other side of the division was the hulking pretty boy Paulo Costa, also climbing the ranks with wins over fighters such as Johnny Hendricks and Uriah Hall. Like a couple of high school students, they roamed the same halls and knew a lot of the same people, but never found themselves face to face. They excelled at what they did, grew in popularity, and like the starting point guard and head cheerleader, seemed a likely pair for the homecoming dance. They only knew each other's names and faces, but then one day, Izzy took notice. Israel fights and beats Robert Whittaker on the biggest night of his MMA career, unifying the belts and becoming the face of the division. Many people were watching, but Izzy could only see that one face in the crowd. Clad in a leopard skin blouse and skin-tight pants, he was hard to miss. Costa was dressed to impress the new champion. Eyes met, hearts fluttered, and Israel worked up the nerve to ask Paulo to a date. You gotta give Adesanya credit for taking care of business with Whittaker and immediately start selling his next event. Up until this point, there had been no dialogue between the two, but when the big man on campus comes a-courtin', Paulo did what any giggling schoolgirl would do and jumped on board. The fight was set, the sparks ignited, and it seemed that we had ourselves a new power couple. Paulo was definitely smitten with the new champion, but he still played hard to get via a torn pectoral muscle, and Adesanya, ever the player, had to move on. The skinny pimp obviously has a thing for Latino muscleheads, and in Paulo's absence, started up a relationship with the ageless Cuban wonder meat, Yoel Romero. They talked, they laughed, they danced, and Paulo's jealousy oozed and dripped like roids from a needle. Paulo was in desperation mode, and in a move straight from the rom-com universe, tried to bamboozle the great matchmaker Dana White by having a friend impersonate a doctor. I'm not making this up, but regardless of Paulo's attempts to fall back in favor with Izzy, the Adesanya and Romero date was set. The people were on board too, and it seemed Paulo had missed his chance with the division's most eligible bachelor. There was a new homecoming king and queen, and everyone was waiting for their night's end soiree. But as the lovely couple took center stage, nothing happened. No spark, no chemistry, no explosions, nothing. Everyone was let down and disappointed. Everyone except Paulo Costa. Finally, after all those lonely nights, after all the antics and heartaches, Israel Adesanya was back on the market. Paulo flipped his hair and got back that certain twinkle in his eye. And Izzy, like many of us do when a relationship crumbles, changed his hair. Only not like many of us, he dyed it pink. Izzy hit the market like the latest dance craze and was actively seeking a new partner. And Paulo was not going to be tossed aside again. In today's world, flirting often starts on social media, and Paulo took to it hard. In his broken English, he was following, tagging, and teasing Izzy practically every day. And like the starting quarterback, Izzy loved the attention. He was finally noticing Paulo again and encouraging the Brazilian pretty boy to keep it up. Paulo kept passing notes and pictures and memes and making Izzy promises of all the great things he would do when the two were finally alone together. After playing the field for a short while, Izzy gave his rose to Paulo, and the fight was set. They agreed upon a time and venue for their late-night rendezvous, and the tensions were thickening. Every time they passed or caught each other's eye, you could feel the chemistry building. The notes and memes continued until finally, one day before the date, they finally met face to face. As they looked into each other's eyes, everything was going well, and like any real gentleman would on the first date, Paulo brought Izzy a gift, but it wasn't flowers or chocolates. Everyone knows that buying a garment for a potential mate can often backfire, and that's exactly what happened when Paulo produced the white belt he was gifting to his beloved. Maybe it wasn't his size, maybe Izzy doesn't think he's sexy enough in white, but Israel slapped that gift out of Paulo's hand like a fat girl being offered broccoli. Every new couple has a first fight. Adesanya was sour, and Paulo thought it was funny. I guess he didn't realize the type of repercussion and wrath that can occur after a significant other was given a whole night of reflection. The big day has finally arrived. The stage is set, the candles are lit, and the music starts to play. Izzy and Paulo meet for the eventful night. But like so many nervous boys trying to close the deal for the first time, Paulo found himself unable to perform. He must have been hypnotized by Izzy's movement and grace, but he just couldn't deliver on all the great things he had promised his partner. I guess Izzy was still reflecting on that poorly thought out gift, or maybe he was upset that Paulo wouldn't make the first move. But after a short while, Izzy had had enough. No more flirting, no more games. Israel had lost interest. The only thing left to do now was dump Paulo in the most brutal and damaging way possible. Izzy publicly embarrassed Paulo, leaving him a bloody, inconsolable, sobbing, semi-conscious heap mid-octagon. To put it briefly, Izzy date-raped Paulo, using a high kick as a roofie. And even worse, Izzy's buddy, the UFC camera guy, films it and distributes it worldwide. You saw it, we all saw it. Izzy straight hit it and quit it. Like a crazy ex-girlfriend, Paulo was simultaneously upset about how things went down and begging to get back together. He's back at it with the notes and videos, but Izzy's bragging about his conquest to all his buddies. Paulo is now as lovesick as ever and making absolutely zero sense. One day he's feeling disrespected and disagreeing 100% with Izzy's antics. The next day he's asking for another title shot, telling Izzy to sign the contract and that he'll be waiting. Poor guy, this dude is blinded by love, or maybe that high kick. There's no contract, I can say that with complete confidence. And if he's waiting on Izzy, he's gonna be waiting for a long time. The skinny pimp has moved on. He's gotten a piece of that booty and is now cruising the yearbook again, looking for the next victim. If Paulo wants a rematch, he's got to do a whole lot more than wait. He's got to get the attention of the champ again, and there's only one way to do that. He's old news for now, and Paulo is not handling it well. Meanwhile, we're all interested in who Izzy's going to choose next. It was fun while it lasted, but for better or for worse, it seems the Adesanya Costa love affair has officially run out of steam. Like the locker room friends of a newly deflowered high school boy, I'm jumping around high-fiving and declaring Izzy's awesomeness. This dude is freaking incredible. A showman, a seat filler, a hell of a fighter, and simply one of the best to ever do it. He may stay on top for a very long time. So here's to Izzy's reign and his next victim. So that does it for this week's episode of I Just Want to Talk. But in the world of MMA, there's always a lot to talk about. On this show, we'll discuss a lot of these topics on a weekly basis. And we've got some good episodes coming up. In preparation of Khabib versus Gaethje, we'll talk about who the greatest of all time is and what the requirements are for that argument. We'll talk about Nick Diaz supposedly making his way back to the octagon and whether or not we should care. We'll discuss future events and fighters on them. We'll stay topical, talking about MMA news and fights coming up. So hit the subscribe button to stay up to date and notified of each video's release, and you might just make my day in the process. And check out some of the previous episodes too. There's some good stuff in there. and good stuff to come. Till next time.
Oops.